Welcome to Insights Fusion podcast, where we dig deep into industry news, startups, innovation, all sorts of cool things that might help to drive your business up and do awesome things. I'm your host, Vygandas Pliasas, with a wealth of 18 years of experience building engineering stuff, products, helping companies to streamline processes and build teams. I'm fractional CTO and management consultant, and I'm interviewing various guests from different startups who has some great knowledge to be shared. So from this podcast, you can also steal good ideas and apply it to yourself. Today, with me, Lukas Bartusevičius, a business strategist and entrepreneur with a strong background in business development and innovation. Lukas is currently the CEO at Freya Cultivation Systems, where he is working on next generation greenhouse technology to advance sustainable agriculture. With experience spanning controlled environment agriculture, real estate, and innovation management, Lukas has played a key role in consulting and family business. Today, we will explore his journey, the challenges of modern agriculture, and what it takes to drive meaningful change in emerging industries. Lukas, welcome to the show.
Hey, hi, I'm Lukas. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as a guest, hoping to contribute something. And just coming back to what Vygandas said earlier, stealing ideas is good. Make sure you provide attribution. And beyond that, we can kick off.
Mention in license agreement. All right.
Okay. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Awesome that you joined and find some time to talk with me. I'm pretty sure that we might get some great stuff from you. So, what is it you're busy now with?
Okay. So I'm a CEO of an early stage startup. We are based in Lithuania. We are qualified as an agriculture, so AgTech, and DeepTech startup. Our product is a system that you can use to produce different types of vegetables in a greenhouse scenario. So when we talk about greenhouses, we talk about commercial operations, which are usually very high capex intensive real estate projects that include a ton of automation, and usually these greenhouses operate throughout the year. Greenhouses already in developed markets, greenhouses already provide 20 to 25% of vegetables that you buy on the retail floor. So they are an important part of the food production system. Our startup only plays a part in the production system. When you think of a greenhouse, you usually think about a structure that is a glass house, can be made of glass, polycarbonate, different types of materials, but it utilizes natural sunlight that you provide to the crops. Light is usually supplemented, especially in our regions, where the days are short and they don't last throughout the sunny days don't last throughout the entire year. But beyond that, there is a lot of technology that goes into a greenhouse. A modern greenhouse will utilize systems from automatic crop handling from everything from seed to picking the fruits and packaging them in most greenhouses is at least in part automated.
Wow.
Beyond that, you can think about in terms of like technological advances that they have that most people don't even think about when they think of a greenhouse is imagine, you're taking fossil fuel and you're turning it into food. So every energy expenditure that you make is a cost. So you have to make sure that you use it very wisely. So something that greenhouses do that people don't think about is they connect to weather stations. And if, for example, your greenhouse knows that the sun is coming out in an hour, 2 hours, it might start opening the vents earlier to release some heat from inside the greenhouse to make sure that the increase in internal temperature is gradual and the crops don't suffer any shock. So this is just one example of how these greenhouses operate. Our role in a greenhouse is to provide a system that can be used to deliver water and nutrients to the plant, and take that plant from an early stage seedling all the way to the final product. Right now, our systems have been tested with lettuce, various different types of leafy greens, and we're heavily investing right now in growing strawberries. Theoretically, well, practically, we've tested our systems with different crops, but not at commercial scale. So I can only talk about small tests that we've done with other crops, and they include tobacco, they include tomatoes, they include bell peppers, chili peppers, a host of medicinal plants, and some other plants that I cannot mention due to the geography and jurisdiction that I am in.
I think we got it. All right.
All for educational purposes, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
So you're in R&D stage now, like researching and developing and trying to make something as efficient as possible, right? To be a part of that big chain of production of the food, right?
Yes.
So it sounds like it's really big numbers, right? It's like, you could say it's like enterprise level stuff. It's not like a small company, like somebody could just implement all of it into this small tiny greenhouse, right? It's like factory kind of.
Let's talk about numbers then. I'll start from what we're doing as a technology and the numbers on the productivity levels on the greenhouse floor, and then what that actually means in return on investment at an investor's level. So the core technology that we have created, which makes us not just an AgTech startup or a generalist, and that makes us a deep technology startup, is how we deliver water and nutrients to plant roots. So normally, if you've seen any type of irrigation structures, even outdoors, they're all horizontal. Everything is on the horizontal plane. And that is to do with, well, outdoors with how the earth is built. And I'm not saying that earth is flat, but in a greenhouse, you're delivering water to plants because it travels horizontally. So you grow plants horizontally. That's how everything has been done for many, many years. Water flows horizontally. We have created a technology that allows us to very effectively take that water and turn it into mist, into droplets. We're not the first ones to do this. This approach of delivering nutrients via mist was initially explored by NASA. And NASA did that because in zero gravity scenarios, it's easier to move aerosol, mist, instead of a body of water. They explored that from the late 90s to early 2000s. But they and other commercial growers that would exploit this technology, they sort of stepped away from it because of the difficulties involved in producing mist. You have to take a very powerful pump. You have to have thousands of nozzles, and eventually something breaks in that system. So what we have done is created a technology that allows us to vaporize water without pressure and with very, very little energy. So that's something that we're very proud of. That's the core technology.
Basically vaping into the roots.
Yes. And we deliver, instead of what you would consider vaping in a typical scenario, we deliver water and nutrients. So if you take water and nutrients, it's a salty liquid. So if you try to spray it through a typical pressure nozzle, it will clog eventually, or the pump will break. Something will happen. The way we do it allows us to spray anything we want. We can spray sand. We can spray, not that it's recommended, but we can spray physical particles without any clogging with very low energy. So that allows us to take what is typically horizontal cultivation and water flowing horizontally. We can now deliver nutrients in 3 dimensions. So that allows us to take, which is the second step in what we do. That's the core technology. Now the product is taking a horizontal plane and then creating triangular cultivation structures. So now on 1 square meter of growing area on the floor, you have 2 square meters in a triangle. So that's the basic geometry behind what we do. And again, we're not the first ones to think it's a good idea to build a triangular structure and increase cultivation floor in the greenhouse that way. We're the first ones to actually figure out how to deliver water and nutrients in a scalable way. So that's the mechanics of it in a simple way. Talking about the biology and whether the plant actually likes aerosol. In fact, they do. They love aerosol as nutrition. The first time this principle was observed was, as the best source I have found it, is quoting something in the late 1950s, where biologists looked at the bottoms of waterfalls. And if you imagine a waterfall, as the water drops down, it creates a lot of mist rising up. And there are plants growing on physical rocks with their roots exposed, without soil. And then that's how scientists sort of realized that, okay, so it doesn't necessarily need earth. It gets its water and nutrients from the water that's rising up in form of a mist. When you grow... go ahead.
So basically, even though it was observed at 1950, it sounds like it was technological barrier to get into like not mass production, but like applicable solution.
Yeah. So it was observed first in the 1950s, but no one really paid any attention to it. Then NASA took it and did a lot of experimentation with it. And what they realized is if you grow plants in air, they hang in air, and you mist them intermittently, you get 20 to 30 to 40% higher yields. The reason this happens, compare a plant hanging in air versus a plant with its roots under earth or submerged in water. Their limitation is access to oxygen. Everybody knows, like if you come from an agrarian country like we do, everybody knows that aerated soil performs better. Like if you punch, like in the field, if you punch lots of holes and you aerate, lift up the earth, there's oxygen that gets into the soil that provides extra oxygen that can be absorbed in the roots. Commercial techniques called hydroponics that use horizontal flowing water, they don't necessarily provide additional oxygen because oxygen that is in water dissolves up to maximum 25, 30-ish parts per million at a typical greenhouse operating temperature. And as plants take that water or oxygen out of the water, it needs to be replenished. So there are lots of technologies being developed how to add additional oxygen into the water. We take that out of the equation completely. The roots already hang in air, which is 21% oxygen in a typical greenhouse scenario, or maybe a bit less because CO2 is supplemented, but that's beside the point. And you spray, the way we do it, we spray a plant for 3 to 5 seconds every 5 to 10 minutes. And for the rest of time, the plant catches the water, the roots, they hold on to it, they absorb it, they dry a bit, they absorb the oxygen, and then we respray them. So that's the methodology of irrigation that we can utilize, adopt by using our uncloggable ultrasonic nozzles. So not only is it better mechanically because we can utilize a three-dimensional structure, but also the plants actually prefer it. And if you do it well, you can get higher yields, faster plant development, and fewer root diseases, because in a well-oxygenated environment, it's difficult for pathogens to develop and spread. So in many, many ways, this approach that we take is quite beneficial. The challenge that we have is growers and farmers in general, they are very conservative and they have their techniques that they've developed over years and years. So how do we change their mind about adopting this new approach? It has its risks. It has a learning curve. The equipment is pricey, and we have to get them on board to pilot it and try it out. So now comes the part where I talk about the capex of a greenhouse.
Okay. Depending
on where you are, let's begin with the performance of a greenhouse. So you have the horizontal plane, the floor area in a greenhouse. If you take lettuce, let's just use lettuce as an example. The most modern greenhouse on average will house, including young plants and old plants, just purely, let's use a simple example. A greenhouse in Lithuania that I know that produces a lot of lettuce in an automated way using a modern system has about 44 plants per square meter in a greenhouse. If you put more plants in a horizontal space, they'll be fighting for resources, they'll be fighting for sunlight, they'll be fighting for irrigation. That will be counterproductive. So there's a biological limit to how many plants you can have per floor area. And if you want to double your output, you have to double your floor area, basically build a new greenhouse. We can double the number of plants per square meter just by going in this triangular manner.
So it's a whole double.
Yes, so we can double the productivity, double the units of sale that you can produce. If many different ways to look at it, but we can either increase the numbers of production. So if you're using heads of lettuce, we can double the number of lettuce that you produce. Or if you're going for something like strawberries, you don't go for heads of plants, you go for how much you can get out of a single plant in terms of biomass. So we can go for even more than double in certain scenarios. But that's just one part of it. That's the revenue side. There is the whole profitability side of things. So in a greenhouse, your cost buckets, well, obviously the main thing is labor. That's something you can't get away from, and labor is going up. But the next big cost area is your energy. You take energy to create the perfect environment for the plant to develop. So if it's cold outside, you have to heat it. If it's hot outside, you have to cool it. But throughout the year, you're fighting what's happening outside with heating and cooling systems inside the greenhouse. But that is a cost tied to area. So if you have 1 hectare of a greenhouse, you'll be cooling and heating 1 hectare of a greenhouse. If we double the number of units of production, we're basically increasing the unit economics on a single plant, because your heating and cooling bill doesn't scale with the increased number of production. Hectare. Yeah, so you're doubling your revenue, but the EBITDA can go as far as triple on the same floor area.
It sounds like a easy choice to me.
Well, in Excel, yes, but that is not something that growers. Excel is not something that they will consider it, of course, the financial models and the potential payback. But what they want to see is the system in operation. They have to inspect it. They have to kick the wheels, so to speak. They have to, there's a lot of people involved in the production process. The agronomist has to be happy. The owner, the director, everybody needs to be happy. The crop itself has to be marketable. If you grow a plant at an angle, you're actually decreasing the units of light that a plant receives, because it's not horizontal. Now you're decreasing it. So how do we supplement that? There are considerations involved. It's not a major consideration. Increasing light is not an issue. Something that also crosses farmers' minds is how marketable is the crop. If we grow a plant at an angle, a lettuce, will it be straight when you pick it, or will it be bent going towards the light? So there are lots of things that we need to work out and consider going from picking the right varieties that we can offer to grow. Not every variety will perform well as an end product. But there are some things that we can definitely do with ease. So that's why we're going on a crop by crop basis and not going after every single thing.
Interesting. So they have to meet the standard of supermarkets, because everything has to be more or less same look, same size, yes. More or less.
Yeah, it very different trading systems in different countries and agreements between retailers and growers. But if you take strawberries, for example, there are different classifications of strawberries. There's the extra class strawberries, where it has to be of certain diameter. I think, if I remember correctly, an extra class strawberry has to be at least 25 millimeters in diameter. It cannot deviate by 5% across a wide range. I don't recall those exact figures.
Wow.
I'll be able to look that up. But if you want to market
5% is a very low number on 25 millimeters.
Maybe I rushed this. I don't exactly recall the figures, but there are strict requirements for different types of crops. And if your strawberry doesn't match the extra criteria, then it goes one class down, and then you get less money from the retailer or from whoever is your buyer in the chain. So there are lots of things to consider. What is the trade-off from going from a horizontal production system, which is known and has been perfected over many, many years, into going into an angled production system, which, in Excel and in a drawing might look like a very simple choice, but there is a lot of work in the background to test scientifically every single thing that we claim and every single thing that we want to put money behind. And that's what makes us DeepTech. It's not only the DeepTech of the underlying ultrasonic systems, which is a whole nother area, but also how do we scientifically ensure that the plants at the end are the same class as the grower expects. And that's what in a DeepTech startup is the more challenging thing when you compare us to any other, let's say, generalist startup, any B2B SaaS or any other startup. Our R&D and financing need curve is way higher in the beginning. But if we, eliminate the risks through the careful and selective R&D, then in the longer term commercialization risks are actually lower, because we have created a product and patented a product that, at least for the time being, no one will be able to replicate. And if we put a good business model behind that, then there is moat, there is protection around the product and the business
Very
model.
nice. Very nice. Sounds like a future. Definitely. Like, why wouldn't anyone use it? It makes a lot of sense.
So we've worked. So just to make, I'm talking about things that sound very futuristic, but in reality, we created this technology in 2019, 2020, the ultrasonic spraying stuff. It took us 2 years to finally perfect that into a product. And the first products that we created were meant for vertical farming, indoor farming, which is a different thing from greenhouses. It uses artificial light. It uses layers upon layers of cultivation, and it has different challenges compared to greenhouses. It was a very sexy and popular industry starting from. So it started early. It started perhaps in 2012, 2013, but the boom behind it and the major investment behind vertical farms came from 2019, 2020 COVID restrictions, where everybody was like, oh, this is the future. We can produce food. We don't need to import it in a very repeatable, scalable way. Unfortunately, the hype didn't match the fundamentals in the sense that the energy cost was too high per kilo of produce. So to give you an example, in 2020, 21, there was a boom in vertical farms. However, it took the investors a minute to realize that to produce 1 kilogram of lettuce in a vertical farm in Europe was about 12 to 15 euros per kilo. So in a kilo of lettuce, you have 10 saleable units. In a good case scenario, assuming no loss. Typical lettuces in the supermarket are either 100 grams or 150 grams. So let's say we're going for smaller ones, 10 units of production in a kilo. So €1.50 per lettuce production cost. So by the time it gets to the retailer, the asking price might be around 4.5 to €5. So that's not really doable in Europe. That's
We are getting there to those prices.
Vertical farming does work in certain pockets around the world, and some of those pockets are very large. So if you think about areas where shale gas is cheap, so we have I don't know what the kilowatt hour right now in Lithuania is, but in the US, back in the peak production times, and especially after Russia invaded Ukraine, the energy prices in Europe went up to like 33 cents a kilowatt hour. In the US, because of shale, commercial prices are like 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So it does make sense in the US in some areas where it's difficult to deliver fresh produce from a greenhouse. It also makes a lot of sense in places like Singapore, where they don't have a lot of land and they need to increase productivity to be less dependent on imports. But on the whole, I think greenhouse farming makes a lot more sense. And if you think about hectares of cultivation, if you took all the layers of vertical farms down and you put them on the ground in like a horizontal plane, you would have, in my best estimation, no more than 100, maybe 120 hectares. If we look at greenhouses, and I'm talking just the most modern automated greenhouses with climate controls, additional lighting, you would be looking at about 70,000 hectares, and that's excluding China. So the market's ability to provide a steady stream of fresh produce, high quality produce, relies much more on greenhouses than vertical farms. And at the same time, it makes a lot more sense for us to focus on the greenhouses. But the reason I'm on this tangent is by the time we released our first product in late 2022, which was meant for vertical farms, because we bought into the hype, the market had crashed. The vertical farms were no longer attractive financing, and our aeroponic irrigation tools were not really relevant anymore on the scale that we had expected. So we had to pivot very, very quickly. So what we did, end of 2022, we're at our runway's end. We're at our wit's end. We don't know what we're going to do next. We took the remainder of our money. Some of it went towards Jägermeister. We had a few drinks, and then we just drew a triangle on a piece of paper, and we said that this is what we're doing next. It just made a lot of sense. It literally took our blindfolds off. We had been too focused narrowly on improving vertical farming, not realizing that there is this massive industry where yield increases had been very, very gradual, and it didn't really have a lot of innovation behind yield increases. And I'm talking about greenhouses. And when we started looking deeper into greenhouses, while we developed the technology, we in parallel dove deep into the industry. We talked to a lot of people in the industry, and we realized that not only is there a lot of money being flooded into greenhouses, a typical greenhouse complex, the ones being built in the US, start from 10 to 20 and even more million dollars in capex. You need to have plus more than probably $20 million in capex to achieve the economy of scale in order to be efficient. The problem is that they're focusing a lot on optimizing resources, use of resources as much as possible, driving down costs, improving automation. But the yield figures on a per square meter basis have not really increased dramatically in the last 10, 15 years. Well, they have increased, but not on the scale of twice.
Do you know when's the break even when you put in 20 mil into greenhouse? Roughly, you're talking
really
about a year, 10 years.
Those are 15 to 20 to 25 year projects, depending on how much market you already have, and you know what your labor costs and what the energy fluctuations are going to be. That's what you depend on a lot. And there have been, again, many big startups that have failed because, in my own personal understanding, there were a lot of people who are clever in sort of figuring out the business model and how we can do something in theory, but then once they actually get down to growing and realizing that they don't get the plant to perform as the plant performed theoretically in Excel, and then that's when you have plant diseases getting in, you have production shortages, you're not able to manage your pest control strategies, and your substrate that you're using comes in infected, and you don't know how to deal with these things. And then that's when a lot of businesses can fail. But the good thing is that there are a lot of very qualified growers in this area, and a lot of them are in Europe. The interesting thing is that if you're building a greenhouse, no matter where you are, it can be Singapore, it can be Mexico, it can be North America. I think 8 times out of 10, you will be calling a company from the Netherlands. That's the so-called capital of greenhouses. That's where the technology comes from. That's where all the key experts come from, education. Lots of great universities around the world have agriculture programs specifically for indoor farming. But I think on the whole, the Netherlands are sort of the cream of the crop. And then just by looking at hectares, I quoted 70 to 75,000 hectares of greenhouses, the most modern ones around the world. Japan actually has the most greenhouses, and they have a lot of technology, but they're not, I think, as connected to the rest of the industry around the world. The Netherlands, so 6,000 hectares are in Japan, about 5,500 maybe thousand hectares, according to my estimations, are in the Netherlands. And just for understanding the scale, the US and Canada combined don't have 2,000 hectares altogether. So the 40% of the global market for us in these most modern greenhouses are within like 3 hours flight from Lithuania.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's why not only is it a good market for us to pursue, but also being in Lithuania is not only advantageous geographically in reaching and serving the market, but also is very advantageous in the lower R&D costs, I would say, compared to the rest of the world, especially in the more advanced countries. Not that we're not advanced, but I think it's just easier in terms of salaries and the R&D costs and the area of like the experts that we have on the technical level in Lithuania that we can just get on the phone with different universities, different researchers. There's a lot of knowledge and help available here, so the costs are lower. So we can produce a really good product here.
All right. Tell me more about DeepTech. What is it? What does it mean? So it's like technology and it's deep. How it is like different in a nutshell?
I think there are lots of great definitions of deep tech, but it's characterized by usually a deep understanding among founders in some sort of a highly technical area is being explored, a novel area that will probably result in patents. It requires a lot of upfront R&D to figure out a product, and not only to develop a technology, but then turn that technology into a product. And it's only a certain type of investors that pursue it. However, Europe is actually known for its appetite for deep tech. It's actually going through a deep tech boom. It's a fundamentally backed technology, so it's not something that you can code together overnight, publish it through different channels, get lots of downloads, and then get people to sign up for a sort of recurring fee. It's something that requires a lot of upfront innovation, and it's very risky in the beginning. But in the longer term, as I mentioned before, you create a moat around your product. You're much more difficult to remove from a position that you have created through your R&D funding. So when you're talking about, you have to have, for example, highly technically capable co-founders. So in my team, I am surrounded by very technically capable people. We have a PhD in agronomy who just looks at plant mineral nutrition and how they perform in different lighting scenarios. We have a person who created the hardware and the firmware and the software and all the designs behind our ultrasonic irrigation and the triangular cultivation systems. We have someone who comes from a very technical operations management field, and I'm the least technically capable person, which I think is also very important to have on the team, because somebody needs to communicate all the stuff that you're doing internally to investors and to the clients and
connect everything.
And help guide everyone, because you can get lost in chasing a technological dragon and not seeing something very important. In the longer term, funds that invest in deep tech tend to outperform, but they have to be a specialist fund. When we raised our recent round, I made the mistake early on in talking to a lot of generalist funds, and that's, in hindsight, I should really not have done that, because it's not only counterproductive, but it's also demoralizing, because you're developing a technology that has a lot of potential. You're breaking new grounds in things that have only been theorized about, and then you get asked a question about monthly recurring revenue. That's really not the conversation you want to be having. You want to talk about the strength of your IP and your technology. You have to have a reasonably good business model that you're pursuing. That's a given. Yes. But I think setting aside short-term revenue goals that a typical generalist investor might be looking for in a startup you are creating a technology that can increase its target market very quickly. So if we're talking about greenhouses, that's just one area that we can apply this technology in. There are lots of other applications where ultrasonic spray is useful, starting from just adding humidity and creating spraying systems that are uncloggable, even for field agriculture, to creating systems for delivering fuel in certain types of engines, in hydrogen production, and very different other areas.
One more question. So for those who are fundraising and trying to, maybe making the same mistake that you've done, and trying to figure out whether they should be talking to generalist funds or deep tech funds, what would be your advice to those guys or girls? How to easier make the separation of how to identify what you're doing and which way to go?
Absolutely. So I think one of the most important things is to understand that you're deep tech. That's something that you might not be aware of, even though it's glaringly obvious for everyone else looking at you. And then once you've looked at yourself, and just look up a deep tech definition and see if you match it. That's the first step that I should have taken. And then secondly, you have to talk to funds that are in deep tech, who understand what you're going through, who are willing to take that risk with you, who are set up in that particular way. And since we raised our funding in Lithuania, there are actually funds operating here that are in deep tech. And being in Lithuania, we have very easy access to the Finnish market. We have access Finnish investors and the Nordics and the Danish investors. But being in Lithuania, there are funds here. One of our investors, our actual lead investor, is called BSV Ventures, formerly known as Baltic Sandbox Ventures, and they really understand deep tech. That's their whole thesis. What they did, they evaluated our technology, not just in what it can do today and how we came to it and what the protectability is in terms of IP, but also other areas that we can apply it in. How can we expand, even if this product fails and if we don't achieve anything in the worst case pessimistic scenario, can we then flip to another market and then create another technology somewhere else using the same IP that has been created? And based on obviously our own internal analysis and theirs, we figured out that there are other exciting areas that we can apply this technology in, either in our own R&D efforts or through licensing. So that's just one area. Other things that you should be worried about is not talking to generalist investors. If you can't figure out whether they're deep tech or generalist, just look at their portfolio. And if it's like B2B SaaS heavy, just that's not the conversation that you want to have.
But it might be that you think that you're R&D-ish, technology, but you building B2B SaaS. I was wearing a hat of R&D manager in a SaaS company, and it was also R&D. And in the UK there are tax returns for R&D, and there are European Union grants for R&D. So a lot of companies are trying to make it to be R&D, even though it's not really R&D project.
Well,
so you might get confused really easily after that.
Well, if it depends, you'll know it when you see it. If you're doing R&D to create a technology that enables a business model that only you can do, and you require a lot of funding upfront to achieve that goal, then you're deep tech. If you have already a product running and you're doing R&D to deliver incremental improvements rather than breakthrough improvements, then you're probably a generalist type tech. Not saying that it's only two buckets. There's obviously all kinds of other technology types that you can use as buckets, but what I'm doing is distinguishing between these two ones. And if you're still not sure, just talk to people. There are lots of events, lots of different funds. Don't waste your own time delivering pitches to people who don't want to hear them. Don't deliver. your thesis in a way that matches what you're actually offering. Just talk to different funds. There are lots of events. Just go and talk to people from the funds. They always have scouts everywhere. The job of many people at a fund is to generate deal flow. So you might not get to talk to the partner or the decision maker initially, but you will get to talk to a lot of analysts and lots of them are very friendly and outgoing people. They generate deal flow. They have to talk to lots of different startup founders. Yeah, but they're nice people by nature. Otherwise, they don't really get hired for those things, or they don't stay in the role very long. So if you go out to those events and just have a beer and talk to people, you'll get your answer pretty quickly. There's no better way to research things than actually talking directly to the people who'll be making the decision. So just go out and talk to people. So it took us a minute to realize we were DeepTech. No, we knew we were DeepTech, but we just didn't realize that we should be talking to generalist investors. That's I think the main lesson. And then you'll be able to maybe our journey was we joined formerly Baltic Sandbox Ventures, then called Baltic Sandbox Ventures, pre-accelerator or accelerator. I don't recall the stage of the program that we joined in. And they worked with us closely to help position not only the pitch that we will be delivering in the early stages of our raising journey. And this is another lesson that I'll come back to. But in the early stages, we joined the BSV Ventures Accelerator, pre-accelerator program. And they worked with us very closely to help us not only understand how we can position DeepTech in the customer's eyes, because it doesn't concern just the investor. It concerns, in our case, the grower, because it's not an add-on to what they're doing. It's a fundamental change in the way they do things. And obviously we have to make the technology work in the same workflow that they're used to, but it's still a fundamental detachment from what they know and what they're used to. So we not only learned how we should be positioning and de-risking and removing doubts from their eyes when introducing this technology, but also we learned how to introduce it and talk about it with the funds. And we studied quite a bit how deep tech differs and what investors expect in deep tech versus generalist tech. So that was very, very beneficial to us. And if you have that opportunity as a deep tech startup, you should definitely take that because you'll be talking to a lot of people also going through the same thing that you're going through. And in our case, we had people in our cohort and in previous cohorts who come from AgTech. And just to continue with the example of BSV Ventures, they are currently focusing quite a lot on biotechnology and med tech startups. And considering that Lithuania is changing its regime about sharing anonymized patient data that can be used for various types of experimentation, I think that's a very promising field. So if you're doing something like that, that's some of the people that you should be reaching out to, and not necessarily for raising funding, but just have a talk with them. They really know what they're doing, and I think they will for a very relatively young fund, I think they will be the leaders of deal flow in deep tech in the Baltics and the Nordics very soon.
Very interesting. I was wondering, was listening and wondering, it sounds really like a really interesting area, like a branch of what kind of startup you might be working on. And it's like, it requires extra brain effort to figure out what needs to be done rather than, in my understanding, so SaaS B2B is, you get the idea, you hire somebody from somewhere and they code it. Nothing really to create that much in there. And here you basically start and you don't really know the answer. You kind of how to go through that whole journey to get to the answer eventually, hopefully. And is it?
I think. Yeah, please go ahead.
Is it higher risk or is it lower risk compared to the other one?
I haven't. Okay, so I haven't been in the other scenario, I've certainly worked with startups and I know people in those scenarios, but until you're in it, you don't quite understand it. So I cannot compare understanding with knowledge. I can describe to you how to ride a bike, but until you actually ride it, you don't know how to do it. But to go back to what you actually raised, when we started off, we didn't fully really know what we were doing, especially considering that we were going into vertical farming and not greenhouses. The point is that you have a team that you really believe in. You have people that you know you can rely on. You have a very exciting technology that keeps delivering results, and you just have this overwhelming belief that you'll put something useful together for the clients, and you'll be able to prove it on a scale that is indisputable. So we have that belief. I think we have that drive. I don't know if this is a journey for everyone. Maybe there are easier ways to getting that entrepreneurship journey, and certainly the fun and the experiences that come with that. But if you're going down this route of DeepTech, be ready to accept the fact that what you're working on now, by the time you first introduce it to the market, you might have to change it quite a bit, and that's okay. That's what you should be hoping for, because if my understanding is that that's what you hope for, because if the market gives you a direction, that's something that you should follow. So, not saying that you should be, excited about pivoting, but it's something that might happen, and that's not a bad thing. The most important thing is to have a team that you can stick together with, that they don't get demoralized. And then some people, something that I haven't mentioned is that our investors, by the time we were done with our initial runway and we were expecting to get the initial sales, we submitted the patent application and we introduced the product to the market. We were out of funding, and they continued to contribute and insert more and more funding into the company as we continued to prove that the new product is going to make sense. So we had people that trusted us to deliver returns, and they continued to stick with us even when we told them that what we're doing no longer makes sense, but give us another chance because we have an idea of how what to do with it next. So that trust is earned. That trust is earned through transparency and continued drive. And I think they saw that in us, and they continue to trust us. So I'm eternally thankful to them for this stipend that actually then now is turning into equity with decent valuation.
Interesting. So is it a correct statement that for venture capital, it might be even more important to have a strong team in the portfolio rather than an idea that would sound, like awesome?
Absolutely. if that's one thing you take away from this, please let it be this. The strength of your team is what will get you to the across the line when it really matters. If you have a team that's not fundamentally strong, if you have people that haven't been tested or you haven't seen tested, that's not necessarily wrong, but make sure that you're aware of it and you're constantly thinking about how to improve your team as a unit. That's the most important thing. Like the team, everybody can have a good idea. There's this website, I'm struggling to remember the name, but there's a website, and I promise you I'll find it and I'll send you the link and you can put it up somewhere. But there is a website where people, let's say you get a business idea, a brilliant idea, let me do this. But people rarely commit to those ideas. So there's a website where you can submit your idea with a timer. And if you don't deliver on your idea, it goes public. So there is a website where there are lots of public ideas where people's potentially startup ideas are actually now public for taking and running with. The point is that people come up with great ideas every day. I've had billion-dollar ideas that I came up with that I completely forgot by the end of the day because I didn't write it down and I never did anything with it. And
I had many ideas. It's like
everyone.
And just try something, and then you think, "Oh, that's stupid," And after like 2 years, raises like 200 million for the same idea, and you read about it and it's like, oh god damn,
Yeah,
that could be me.
I'm sure everyone has been through this. The point is that you have to execute on it, and your team executes on it. If our team is I see it at the moment, we're still 4 people. We're going to grow very quickly because of the funding and the need for improved R&D and now manufacturing. But a car has to have 4 wheels, at least in the beginning. Like there has to be somebody who can talk to investors and customers and understand what is happening and communicate. But then we need subject matter expertise. So without an agronomist, we're not a startup. Without an engineer in ultrasonic systems, we don't have a system to irrigate plants with. So it takes a team to build a puzzle, and that's, I think, the most important thing. So I've had my own scenarios where I overvalued the potential of the team, or I didn't even look at it. And that's something that I learned personally. And I also learned in consulting many startups. Sometimes, like after a while, once you work in the field, you get to evaluate it pretty quickly. And that's actually how I met this team that I joined. I used to work at a national innovation and entrepreneurship center for a brief period in Lithuania after I returned back from the UK. And I consulted lots of startups. And this team, which was then called Baltic Freya, I joined them because I would give them work, I would give them homework, and then they would come back with more work done, more questions, more avenues to pursue. And then we would, chisel it down, we would narrow down the focus, get rid of random stuff, and then they would come back with more work done. And I've seen lots of people with great ideas who didn't have the execution. This team had an idea that was still in flux, but the execution was there. And that I think for me was the determining factor to join them at first on a sort of exploratory basis, and then later as a business developer, and then later as a CEO.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about leadership. So what was the biggest challenge for you?
That is a good question. I think accepting myself as a leader, as an actual leadership role that I have, that I need to nurture and develop as a skill, that was the biggest hurdle. Once I accepted that, it's no longer a hurdle. You just, I instinctively, I think, knew what needed to be done in certain things in certain areas. I don't look back at things and think about them as losses or mistakes. They're just things that I did that generated information that then became a lesson. But then the actual acceptance of myself as, okay, now we're not we're still a horizontal unit, but somebody needs to point the way, and then somebody needs to make decisions, and then accept ultimate responsibility. That's not an issue. That I think the hurdle was to sort of identify that as a role, as a thing, as a skill that I need to work on and develop.
It's same when you assign accountability for something to people. If you, for example, assign accountability to two persons, it will mean that nobody will do anything, because it's not really them who has to be accountable. It's somebody else. It's the other one. And if it's one, it basically has to hold everything in their own hands and basically monitor everything and be responsible and know all of that stuff and be on top of everything. And everybody else knows, okay, so we cannot be like too loose, because it's like, let's control the environment then.
And then controlled environment agriculture. But then what I'm coming back to is what you're saying is obvious, and then I think most people know that. It's just a natural human dynamic. If two people are responsible, then nobody's responsible. But then knowing that didn't initially translate into looking at our team as a unit from the outside and saying, okay, so why is he or no one else responsible for this specific role that needs to be implemented? So I think giving advice to people is sometimes easier than seeing yourself from a different perspective. But it's something that comes with experience, with accepting advice from people, and then some things just do happen naturally. So that was a hurdle. It was just something that maybe could have been done earlier. But I think everything is a lesson, no regrets. Everything is just moving forward and then becoming a better resource to your team, becoming whatever is needed to be as a leader, both in pointing a direction as well as making sure that everyone is well and everyone has the resources they need, and you know, the work is coming in, and then, you know, everybody gets as much pressure as they get reward.
Correct. Real enabler. That's good. That's correct mindset, I'd say. Awesome. All right. It was really, really insightful and interesting conversation. I'm pretty sure everybody, every viewer or listener should have learned something, at least about what's deep tech and what's not, and what's the difference. And it was really interesting to listen about greenhouses, about your technology, the level of complexity of it, because you might read on a website, on a paper, what it might be, but when you introduce it, like the challenges that comes together, like jamming nozzles, tests with NASA, all of that stuff, it's like change how you perceive it. It's like way bigger thing, and much bigger challenge than it might sound sometimes.
Well, just to come back to one point, so NASA is carrying on with different types of work in delivering nutrition to plants in lower orbit. But I'm very happy to say, I cannot say which space agency, but one of the top space agencies in Europe is actually testing our nozzles internally for use in lower orbit irrigation.
Wow.
Growing food in the lower orbit. So that's pretty cool. It's not something that we can talk about quite a bit. It's covered by an NDA, but I can disclose the fact that it's actually happening.
So you're practically a rocket scientist.
No, well, not me. I just work with clever people.
Awesome. Sounds really cool. Is there anything else you'd like to add? We discussed a lot of things. So I'm sure.
I think if you are a startup in today's world trying to push a complicated product through the door, one thing that I have found very, very useful is not focusing too much on the modern marketing reading and going back decades and decades. I'm talking about books written in the 30s, 40s, and 50s on Claude Hopkins, for example, with scientific advertising, and then Ogilvy's works. And I have found those books plenty more useful in figuring out what we need to do in communicating our message compared to some of the work that's produced today. That's just my own personal knowledge. I'm rereading some of those books for the third, fourth time. I think just if you're going to read anything in terms of marketing and sales, just read Scientific Advertising by Hopkins. It's not scientific advertising in terms of advertising a scientific product, but it's a scientifically simple approach to understanding how you need to introduce a product to the market. I think maybe it's just me, but I really, really appreciate all the works. I think behind just the logical simplicity behind some of those things that are being regurgitated in marketing today. That's the original version. Nothing's better than the original.
Awesome. That's unexpected advice, but somehow I can relate. It makes sense. I haven't tried it, but it makes sense somehow, because I've read a lot of modern, marketing literature, and it's all really similar. It's about the same thing, and it just scratches the surface, and it's like it's not deep enough, and it's you at least I didn't get enough, I think, from it, and had learned a lot of things hard way. Awesome. All right. So Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to have you as a guest. Maybe we'll see some other time to discuss your, uh, space science, rocket science thing.
We can do an update towards the second half of the year
Awesome.
to see how we're progressing with our new plans, and we're planning to participate in exhibitions and generate quite a bit of interest around the world. So I think this is the first year where our product meets the market in a way that is very head on, not in a stealthy way. So I think
Nice.
interesting updates and lessons and improvements coming soon.
Nice. Definitely. All right. And all of you who are watching and listening, thank you for your time. I hope you found really good bits that you can take for yourself. And see you in the next video. Take care.